What would you do if your quiet new home started warning you about a crime no one wanted solved? Caleb Voss, a lonely veteran, only wanted peace beside the frozen harbor. Then he adopted Rook, a retired German Shepherd canine who refused to sleep through the first night. The old dog kept returning to one spot beneath the wooden floor, trembling at something Caleb could not see. What they found there was not treasure, but a buried military box tied to a woman missing for 6 years. Soon, Snowfall Harbor would learn that its most trusted neighbor had been protecting more than a secret. If this story pulls you in, leave a like, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep writing deeper stories for you. Snowfall Harbor looked gentler from a distance than it had any right to be. In winter, the little Michigan town turned bright beneath the snow. Roofs wore white. The harbor docks slept under ice. Yellow lights trembled above bakery windows and brick storefronts, and the lighthouse stood pale against the morning sky. From the hill road, the place could have been printed on a Christmas card. Caleb Arlen Voss knew better than to trust a pretty surface. He drove slowly along the lakeside road in his old pickup, one hand on the wheel, the other near the heater vent that rattled but never worked right. At 51, Caleb still had the shoulders of a man who had spent half his life carrying weight for others. But the years had changed how strength sat on him. It no longer announced itself. It settled into his back, into his hands, into the way he moved only when movement was needed. The town knew him as the man to call when a generator died before a storm, when a boat motor froze, when a furnace coughed itself silent at midnight. He fixed things. He accepted cash, coffee, or both. Then he went home before anyone could ask him to stay for dinner. That suited him. His house stood at the edge of town near the old rescue slip, a weathered wooden building with a slanted roof and windows facing the gray-white lake. Before Caleb bought it at auction, it had been a county rescue outpost, a place where men and dogs once launched into bad weather because someone else had not made it home. A faded metal hook still hung near the back door. In the mudroom, under layers of paint, the outline of an old sign could still be seen if the light hit right. K9, Search/Auxiliary Rescue Unit. Caleb had never painted over it. Not because it meant anything, he told himself, only because paint cost money, and the wall was not leaking. He parked beside the house and listened to the engine tick as it cooled. Snow blew sideways across the windshield. In the truck bed lay a cracked toolbox, 2 coils of cable, and a space he had cleared without admitting why. He was supposed to pick up a dog. The idea still felt like something that belonged to another man's life. A week earlier, Dr. Nora Vale had called him from the county veterinary clinic. Nora was the kind of woman who spoke plainly enough to make lies feel embarrassed. She treated every retired working dog in 3 counties, along with half the barn cats, and nearly all the bad-tempered terriers in Snowfall Harbor. "There's a dog I want you to meet," she had said. "No," Caleb answered. "You haven't met him." "I don't need to." "He's not a puppy. He's not decorative. He doesn't need someone to take Christmas pictures with him. He needs quiet." Caleb had looked around his kitchen then. The single mug in the sink, work gloves drying by the stove, one chair pulled out at the table, while the other 3 sat unused. "I've got quiet," he said. "I know." That was how Nora got him. At the clinic, the wind snapped at the flags outside as Caleb stepped from his truck. He wore his old tobacco-brown canvas jacket, leather patches at the elbows, and a navy knit cap pulled low over his ash-brown hair. Inside, the clinic smelled of disinfectant, wet fur, coffee, and old fear.
Nora met him near the front desk, wiping her hands on a towel. She wore pale green scrubs under a gray fleece jacket, short, dark blonde hair tucked behind one ear. Her eyes were warm, but not soft. Nora had the look of someone who loved animals enough to be angry on their behalf.
"You came," she said. "You made it sound like a medical emergency." "It is, in a way." Before Caleb could answer, she led him down a short hallway past exam rooms and folded towels. At the end was a quiet enclosure separated from the main kennel area. No barking came from it, no scratching, only silence. Inside sat a German shepherd. He was yellow and black, the dark saddle across his back dusted with gray at the edges, his chest deep, his front legs straight and proud. Age had touched him without defeating him. His muzzle was dark, but silvered around the chin. One ear stood sharp, the other bore a small tear at the top. His amber eyes lifted to Caleb and stayed there, not challenging, not begging, measuring. "This is Rook," Nora said. Caleb did not step closer. He knew better than to crowd a creature that had spent a lifetime reading threats before humans knew they had made one. "He worked search and rescue," Nora said. "Human scent, evidence location, waterline searches in rough weather." His handler was Eli Mercer. Caleb had heard the name, maybe from old-timers at the harbor. He did not ask. "What happened to Mercer?" Nora's face shifted. "He died a few years back. Rook stayed in the county program longer than he should have. Then the sounds started getting harder for him. Metal doors, truck engines at night, sirens from too far away. He has hip stiffness and old paw damage from frostbite, or close to it. He needs rugs on slick floors, shorter walks in cold weather, and someone who won't punish him for remembering." Remembering. The word moved through Caleb before he could stop it. Rook stood. No leap, no rush. Just a slow rise from the mat, controlled and careful, with a slight hesitation in the right rear leg. He took one step forward, then another. Caleb kept still. The dogs stopped an arm's length away. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Rook lowered his head and sniffed Caleb's left glove. The glove was tucked halfway into the pocket of his work jacket, old brown leather darkened by oil, snowmelt, and years of use. Beneath it, folded in the same pocket, was a pair of worn military gloves Caleb rarely wore, but never threw away. Rook's breathing changed. Not fear, not excitement. Recognition, maybe. The dog sat beside Caleb's boot, close enough that his shoulder almost touched the man's leg, but not quite. It was the distance soldiers sometimes kept when they did not know whether comfort would be welcome, but offered their presence anyway. Caleb felt something in his chest tighten with such quiet force that he almost resented the animal for it. Nora watched without speaking. "He doesn't do that with most people," she said finally. Caleb looked down at the dog. "Maybe he's tired." "We all are." That should have been the end of it. Caleb could have stepped back, said no, driven home to his quiet house and his one chair, and the lake that never asked him for anything. A dog meant routine. It meant need. It meant another living thing noticing whether he came home. And worst of all, it meant being noticed in return. Rook tilted his head slightly, the torn ear catching the clinic light. Caleb remembered a night years ago, not in Michigan, when he had seen something wrong and told himself someone higher up must have seen it too. He remembered the morning after, the medic's hands, the smell of dust and blood and hot metal, the way silence could become a decision even when a man never meant to choose. He looked away first.
"What does he eat?" Caleb asked. Nora exhaled as if she had been holding her breath. By late afternoon, Caleb was driving home with Rook in the back seat. The shepherd did not whine. He did not press his nose to the window like a young dog thrilled by motion. He sat upright, steady despite the old truck's bumps, watching the lake through the glass. Caleb adjusted the heater vent toward him without comment.
Snowfall Harbor glowed as they passed through. Lila Monroe was turning the sign in the bakery window. A man in a red parka shoveled the sidewalk outside the hardware store. The lighthouse beams swept faintly through the pale air, though the sun had not fully gone down. "You're going to hate the floors," Caleb said after a while. "They creak. House is old." Rook's ear twitched. "Don't expect much conversation." Another twitch. Caleb almost smiled, but it did not quite form. At the house, he opened the rear door and waited. Rook stepped down carefully, sniffed the snow, then looked toward the old building. His body went still for one brief second. Caleb noticed it, because noticing small changes had once kept him alive. "You know this place?" he murmured. Rook did not move. Then the dog walked forward, not pulling, not eager, just certain. Inside, Caleb had already laid a thick rug near the stove and placed a water bowl in the kitchen. He had moved a stack of tools away from the wall so the dog would have clear paths through the rooms. It felt ridiculous, how much thought he had put into preparing for an animal he had planned to refuse. Rook entered the mudroom and paused beneath the faded rescue unit sign. He lifted his nose, breathing in the old wood, cold metal hooks, and dust trapped in corners no broom reached. Then he looked back at Caleb. For the first time all day, Caleb felt that the house was not empty. That did not make it less lonely. It made the loneliness visible. Night settled early over Snowfall Harbor. The lake disappeared into darkness beyond the windows. The stove clicked and breathed. Snow brushed softly against the glass. Caleb ate standing at the counter as he usually did, then caught himself and set a second bowl of water closer to the rug, though Rook had not asked for it. The dog lay down with a slow sigh, head on his paws, amber eyes half open. Caleb sat in the old armchair opposite him. Neither man nor dog slept quickly. The house creaked in the cold. Pipes ticked behind the wall. Far off, a truck moved along the harbor road, its engine low and fading. Rook lifted his head. Caleb noticed. The dog stared toward the dark hallway, ears angled forward, body still as carved wood. A moment passed. Then another. Finally, Rook lowered his head again, but his eyes remained open. Caleb looked toward the hallway too. Nothing moved. Nothing waited there except the old house, the old walls, the old floors holding whatever old buildings held when men stopped asking questions. Caleb rubbed a thumb over the cracked face of his father's watch. "Yeah," he said softly, though he did not know who he was answering. "I hear it too." Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time in years, Caleb Arlen Voss was not the only one listening. Rook did not sleep like a pet. He rested in pieces. Caleb noticed it before midnight. The old shepherd would close his eyes near the stove, drift for a few minutes, then wake as if some distant sound had tapped him on the shoulder. No barking, no panic, just the quiet return of a soldier who had never fully left the edge of danger. Caleb kept the lights low and said nothing. He had slept that way for years. Around 3:17 in the morning, the house settled hard in the cold. A pipe knocked behind the north wall. The stove gave a dry click. Rook lifted his head. This time,
He did not lower it again. The dog rose carefully, favoring his right rear leg, and walked into the darkened front room. Caleb followed in socks, not wanting to startle him. Rook stopped near the north wall, lowered his muzzle to a narrow seam between two floorboards, and breathed in. Long, slow, certain.
"What is it?"
Caleb whispered. Rook did not look at him. He pressed his nose closer to the wood, then stepped back and stared at the floor as if waiting for it to answer. Caleb crouched beside him. The boards smelled like old pine, damp dust, and stove heat. Nothing more. At least, nothing his human nose could separate. He ran his thumb along the seam and found only packed grit. "Old house," he murmured. "Plenty of ghosts in the lumber." Rook's torn ear twitched, but the dog did not scratch. After a minute, he returned to the rug and lay down with his eyes open. By morning, the moment seemed smaller. Snow brightened the kitchen windows. Caleb made black coffee, fed Rook the measured portion Nora had written on a taped note, and told himself not every strange thing needed a story. But Rook returned to the north wall twice before noon. He never barked, never begged. He only stood there, nose low, body still, as if some thread of scent kept catching in his memory and pulling him back. Caleb checked the crawlspace hatch outside after lunch.
The hinges were frozen. He found no tracks except his own and the soft crescents of Rook's paws near the porch. He came back inside with numb fingers and a growing irritation he knew was not really aimed at the dog. By the second night, the wind had shifted off the lake. The stove ran hotter. Warmth spread through the old boards, loosening whatever the cold had held down. At 3:17 again, Rook stood. This time he crossed the room with urgency. He planted both front paws near the seam and began to scrape. Not wildly, not like a trapped animal. The motion was controlled, repeated, almost trained. Claw against wood, pause, nose to the seam, claw again. "Rook." Caleb moved toward him. "Easy." The shepherd stopped long enough to look back. His amber eyes were not frightened. That was what disturbed Caleb most. They were focused. Rook stepped to Caleb, caught the cuff of his work shirt gently between his teeth, and tugged him toward the floor. Caleb went still. A dog could be anxious. A dog could fixate. But this was different. Rook was not trying to escape the room. He was trying to bring Caleb into it. The old guilt in Caleb's chest stirred, unwelcome and familiar. He remembered another warning sign, years ago, small enough to ignore, until it was not small anymore. "All right," he said under his breath. "We do it clean." He did not tear into the floor like a curious fool. He turned on the overhead light, took photographs of the boards, the wall, the seam, Rook's position. He put on work gloves, then stopped and changed to a cleaner pair from a sealed box in his tool cabinet. If this was nothing, he would feel foolish. If it was something, he did not want to be the man who ruined it. The third board came loose with a soft groan. Beneath it was not dirt. It was a narrow, hollow space, too deliberate to be rot, lined with old black roofing felt. Inside sat a metal ammunition box wrapped in oilcloth. Olive green, rust at the hinges, heavy when Caleb lifted it free. Rook backed away at once. The dog did not celebrate. He did not wag. He sat near the stove, trembling so faintly Caleb almost missed it. Caleb set the box on a clean canvas drop cloth. On the lid, under a skin of grime, 3 markings had been scratched by hand. E. Klein /Rook/Waterline. The house seemed to shrink around him. Caleb did not know Evelyn Klein, not really. He had heard the name once or twice in town, always followed by a lowered voice and a change of subject. A woman who disappeared. A case people had grown tired of remembering. Rook gave a low sound from his chest. Not a growl. Grief, maybe, if dogs carried grief in places people refused to name. Caleb reached for the latch, then stopped. "No," he said softly. He took more photographs. He noted the time on a scrap of cardboard because paper was closer than his phone. He did not wipe the lid. He did not open the box. He did not move the loose boards, except to place them exactly as they had come up. At dawn, he drove into town with Rook beside him and the locked box secured on the passenger side floor beneath a clean tarp. The bakery was already open, warm light spilling onto the snow. Lila Monroe was behind the counter, red-brown hair tied up in a scarf, flour on one sleeve. She looked at the box, then at Caleb's face. "Morning," she said carefully. "Do you know the name Evelyn Klein?" The warmth left her expression in small degrees. After a long second, Lila reached under the counter and turned the radio down. "That's old sorrow," she said. "And old sorrow makes people mean." Before Caleb could ask more, the bell above the bakery door chimed. Graham Sutter stepped in, carrying the cold with him, broad and neat in a dark wool coat, his silver hair combed back, a paper bag of bread tucked under one arm. He smiled the way men smiled when a room already trusted them. "Caleb," he said, "didn't expect to see you in town this early." Rook moved before Caleb answered. The shepherd did not bark. He did not lunge. He simply stepped between Caleb and Graham, body rigid, torn ear angled forward, eyes fixed on the man's right hand. Graham's smile held, but his hand slid slowly into his coat pocket. Caleb saw it, and for the first time since Rook had entered his life, the old rescue house no longer felt like the place where the mystery had begun. It felt like the place someone had hoped it would stay buried. Deputy Marshal June Harrow did not invite Caleb to sit right away. She stood behind her desk in the county annex, one hand resting on a file folder, the other holding a silver mechanical pencil she had not yet used. She was 50, maybe a little older in the eyes than in the face, with dark hair threaded by gray and tied low at the back of her neck. Her office was neat in a way that felt less like order and more like defense. Caleb placed the wrapped ammunition box on the evidence table between them. Rook sat at his left side, quiet, alert, the leash loose in Caleb's hand. "I didn't open it," Caleb said. "Photographed the floor, the boards, the hollow, the box. Timestamps are on my phone." June looked at him then, not warmly, carefully. "Most people open the box first." "I'm not most people." "No," she said. "Most people say that, too." For the first time that morning, Caleb almost liked her. June studied the scratched markings on the lid without touching it. When her eyes reached the name, something in her face tightened and did not fully release. "Evelyn Klein," Caleb said. "Lila at the bakery knew the name. Didn't want to." "No one here wants to." June set down the pencil. "Because wanting to means admitting we stopped asking too soon." She called a technician to photograph and log the box, then made Caleb repeat everything from the night before. He did it slowly. Rook's restlessness, the north wall, the warmed floorboards, the hollow space, the oilcloth. June interrupted only for exact times, positions, and whether anyone else had entered the house. When Caleb mentioned Graham Sutter at the bakery, June's pencil stopped moving.
Did Mr. Sutter touch the box? No. Did he see the markings? I don't think so. You don't think, or you know? Caleb held her gaze. I know he saw Rook. June's eyes flicked down to the dog. Rook had not moved, but his torn ear had angled toward the hallway, where officers passed behind frosted glass.
June opened a locked cabinet and removed a thin case file. It was not thick enough for a missing person who had once had a life. Evelyn was 42, she said. Environmental water inspector for the county. Grew up here. Father worked the old industrial yard before it shut down. He died sick. She believed the harbor redevelopment project was covering up illegal dumping near the secondary water line. Believed? That was the word the report used. And your word? June looked toward the window. Snow slid down the glass in slow lines. My word was warned. She laid out a photograph. Evelyn Klein stood near the harbor in a mustard rain jacket, hair tied back, chin lifted against the wind. Beside her was a lean, older man in an olive canine jacket. At his feet stood a younger Rook, bright-eyed and strong, wearing a search harness. Rook rose so suddenly Caleb tightened the leash. The dog did not bark. He stepped toward the table and pressed his nose close to the edge, breathing hard. Not at the paper exactly, but at the ghost of a scent no human could reach. June watched him, and for the first time her careful expression cracked. That's Eli Mercer, she said. Rook's handler. Caleb remembered Nora's words. Someone who won't punish him for remembering. What happened after Evelyn disappeared? June slid the photograph back with 2 fingers. A storm, a bad one. Her truck was found near the old pump road. Purse gone, phone gone, no body. No witnesses anyone wanted to trust. Eli insisted Rook had tracked something toward the harbor service route, but there was no physical evidence by the time anyone listened. By the time? June's mouth hardened. Eli was told to stand down. Then Rook vanished for 11 days. When he came back, he was half frozen and no longer fit for field work. The room seemed to draw colder around Caleb. Before he could answer, June's phone buzzed. She read the screen, then called someone named Tessa Rowe and asked for emergency digital recovery on a compromised USB and old audio tape. Her tone left no room for curiosity. Afterward, she gave Caleb a second address. Marla Klein, she said. Evelyn's sister. Don't go there looking for answers like she owes them to you. She has been paying for this town's silence for 6 years. Marla lived in a small blue house facing the lake. Its porch swept clean, though snow still fell. She opened the door only halfway. She was 62, thin, silver-haired, with Evelyn's same blue-gray eyes, only worn down by waiting. I don't talk to reporters, she said. I'm not one. That's what the last 3 said before they turned my sister into a ghost story. Caleb did not argue. He simply held out the copied photograph June had allowed him to show. Marla's hand went to her mouth. Her eyes moved from Evelyn to Eli, then down to the old dog standing in the snow beside Caleb. Rook lowered his head. Marla whispered, "He came back." The words were not accusation, not relief. They were the sound of a door opening in a house that had been locked for too long. Tessa Rowe arrived with a hard orange drive case, a gray parka, and the expression of someone already annoyed by how many people had touched things before she got there. She was smaller than Caleb expected, with short black hair tucked behind one ear and narrow glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She did not shake hands. She looked at the ammunition box, the sealed USB bag, the old tape, then at June.
Please tell me nobody plugged this into a personal laptop. No one opened it, June said. Tessa glanced at Caleb. Good. Curiosity kills metadata. By noon, the county annex had become quieter than a police building should be. Tessa worked in a side room with gloves, anti-static bags, and a portable recovery unit. Caleb waited in the hall with Rook at his feet. The dog was calmer here than he had been at the bakery, though every distant truck engine made his ears shift. June came out once to tell Caleb he could leave. He did not. At 2:40, Tessa opened the door. I recovered fragments. Not enough for a courtroom, enough to make everyone uncomfortable. On her screen were broken images, a snow-dark service road, a row of rusted drums half buried near concrete, a map marked in blue, and a file title that had survived only in pieces. Waterline/secondary pump/risk. June's face went still. This isn't just Evelyn, she said. No, Tessa replied. If these coordinates are real, it's infrastructure. By late afternoon, Dr. Simon Red was standing over the map in June's office, red and blue markers in both hands. He was tall and slightly bent, with tired eyes behind thick glasses, and the distracted hair of a man who forgot weather existed until it soaked him. He traced a line from the old harbor yard to the lower residential blocks. If the dumping happened here, he said, tapping the map, winter may have slowed migration. It doesn't make it safe. Frozen ground delays problems. It doesn't forgive them. Lila Monroe's bakery, the bait shop, the winter market square, 3 streets of small houses. Simon circled them one by one. Caleb watched the marker move and felt the story change shape. A missing woman was sorrow. A poisoned town was something else. June ordered a limited emergency response before sunset, not a full evacuation, not panic. First, Caleb's house and the former K9 outpost were logged as evidence locations. Then the old rescue warehouse and the secondary pump road were restricted. By evening, police cruisers blocked 2 lakeside roads, and orange cones cut through the fresh snow like warnings. People noticed. Snowfall Harbor noticed everything. By 6, half the town had gathered near the bakery corner, wrapped in parkas and suspicion. The Winter Light Festival was 3 days away. Shop windows were decorated. Garlands hung from street lamps. A sign over Main Street read, "Let the harbor shine." Under it, Deputy Cole Brannigan tried to keep people behind the tape. Cole was broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, and visibly unhappy to be standing between neighbors and answers. "What are we supposed to drink?" someone shouted. "Is the water poisoned? Who started this?" No one said Caleb's name at first. Then someone did. Rook pressed against Caleb's leg, not blocking him this time, anchoring him. Graham Sutter stepped onto the bakery curb with a paper coffee cup in hand, neat in his dark coat and burgundy scarf. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Folks," he said, "let the county do its work. We've survived worse weather than this." The crowd quieted because they knew him, because he had pulled boats from ice and opened warming shelters and remembered names. Then Graham looked toward Caleb, gentle enough to wound. Sometimes old places carry old fears. We shouldn't let them turn neighbors against each other before facts are facts. Caleb felt the sentence land, not as an accusation, something cleaner, something harder to fight. Doubt. He could have walked away then, let June handle it, let the town keep its lights and stories, let Rook sleep beside the stove and never ask the floor another question. But Rook lowered his head and rested his muzzle against Caleb's boot. Caleb looked down at the old dog,
at the silvered muzzle, the torn ear, the tired body that had already carried too much human silence. He did not move. June came to stand beside him, eyes on the crowd. "You don't have to be out here," she said. "Yes," Caleb answered. "I do." Across the street, workers lifted a barricade into place near the road to the old pump station. The festival lights flickered on above them, warm and gold against the falling snow. For the first time in years, Snowfall Harbor looked less like a Christmas card. It looked like a town being asked what it had been willing not to know. The tape did not sound like truth at first. It sounded like wind. Tessa played it in June's office with the volume low, one finger resting near the keyboard, as if the old recording might break from being heard. Caleb stood by the wall with Rook beside him. Marla Klein sat in the chair nearest the desk, both hands locked around a folded tissue she had not used. Static dragged across the speakers. Then came a metallic knock, a rush of storm air, and a woman's voice, thin but steady. "If you bury it near the waterline, you're not saving this town. You're poisoning it slower." Marla closed her eyes. No one spoke. The man's answer came warped by wind and damage. "A small town survives because good people know what to hide." Tessa stopped the tape. "That's all I can clean for now," she said. "No name, no clean voice print, not enough to charge anyone." June looked at Marla. "Is that Evelyn?" Marla nodded once. "That's my sister when she was angry enough to be afraid later." Caleb looked at the photograph on June's desk. Evelyn in her mustard rain jacket, Eli Mercer beside her, young Rook at their feet. The woman on the tape was not a ghost or a case file. She was someone who had stood in the cold and kept speaking after fear had already entered her voice. Marla reached into her worn brown bag and took out a pale blue tin box. Its lid was scratched from years of being opened and closed by hands that wanted answers and found only paper. She kept copies, Marla said. Not always where smart people would. In cookbooks, under drawer liners, once inside a Christmas ornament. I thought grief made me search like a fool. June softened, but only slightly. "May I?" Inside were letters, old photographs, water sample receipts, and a yellow, waterproof notebook. Evelyn's handwriting leaned forward, impatient and cramped. Tessa leaned over one page, careful not to touch it with bare hands. Caleb saw Rook's name in the margin before anyone read it aloud. Rook reacted not to the word, but to Marla's voice when she whispered it. "He liked her," Marla said. Evelyn said Rook was the only one in town who didn't argue with data. For the first time that day, a small, broken smile passed through the room. Then Marla found the letter. It had never been mailed. Eli Mercer's name was written on the front. The paper inside was creased soft from being folded too long. June read silently first. Her face changed at the third paragraph. "What?" Caleb asked. June handed him the page. Evelyn had written that the harbor redevelopment vote had been moved up. She believed someone had discovered her sample sites. She was afraid not of losing her job, but of being made to look unstable before she could release the report. Near the bottom, one sentence had been underlined twice. "If I disappear, ask why Rook came back alone." The room felt smaller after that. Tessa took photographs of the letter. June logged the tin box into evidence with Marla's permission. Nothing about it felt triumphant. It felt like borrowing a dead woman's last caution because the living had been too late to earn it. That evening, Graham Sutter came to Caleb's fence carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Snow fell lightly between them.
I heard folks are saying ugly things, Graham said. About you, about that dog. I'm sorry for that. Caleb did not take the coffee. Graham's smile faded only at the edges. This town nearly died once, he continued. When the yard closed, men lost houses, families left. People like Evelyn saw numbers. Some of us saw neighbors packing their lives into trucks. She saw water, Caleb said. She saw one piece. And you saw the whole town? Graham looked toward Main Street, where festival lights glowed through the snowfall. Some truths arrive like storms.
You don't open every door just because the wind demands it. Rook stood beside Caleb, silent, eyes fixed on Graham's right hand wrapped around the cup. Caleb noticed the ring finger then. Not the scar, clearly, not yet. The bend, a small crookedness in a hand that had once reached too close to something with teeth. Graham followed Caleb's gaze and slid the hand into his coat pocket. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Graham said quietly, "Careful, Caleb. Old grief can teach a good man to see enemies everywhere." Caleb watched him walk away through the snow. Inside the house, Rook did not settle near the stove. He stood beneath the faded canine sign in the mudroom, head low, as if waiting for someone who had once promised to come back. Caleb took out Evelyn's copied letter and read the underlined sentence again. This time, it did not feel like a warning from the past. It felt like an instruction. June Harrow did not arrest Graham Sutter that morning. She invited him in. That was how she phrased it when Cole Brannigan found Caleb outside the annex and told him Graham had arrived with a lawyer, a clean coat, and the expression of a man attending a funeral he had helped arrange. Through the glass, Caleb saw Graham sitting in the interview room. He looked smaller without a crowd around him. Still neat, still calm. Silver hair combed back, burgundy scarf folded beside his chair, right hand resting under the table where the camera could barely see it. June entered with a folder, Tessa's recovered images, Eli's notes, and a printed map of the secondary pump road. Graham greeted her by name. That was the first thing Caleb noticed. He greeted everyone as if memory itself were a kindness. "You knew Evelyn was investigating the harbor yard," June said. Graham nodded. Everyone knew Evelyn was investigating something. She was a determined woman. She recorded a conversation the night she disappeared. His face did not change. "Then I hope it helps you find what happened to her." June placed a transcript fragment on the table. "A small town survives because good people know what to hide." Graham read it. The silence that followed was too controlled to be innocent. "I've said things like that," he admitted. "So have many people who've had to keep a town alive." "Did you meet Evelyn that night?" "Yes." Cole shifted behind the glass. Caleb felt the room tighten around that single word. Graham looked tired now, not defeated. "She was going to destroy the redevelopment vote. Not delay it, destroy it. People here had already lost so much. The shipyard, the shops, the families who moved away. You don't understand what it does to a place when everyone young leaves and everyone old pretends not to be scared." June did not soften. "So you took her evidence?" "I tried to stop a panic." "You mean you tried to stop the truth?" Graham's eyes lifted. For the first time, the warmth left them completely. Truth is not clean just because it is true. By sunset, June had enough to request a deeper warrant, not enough to close a case. The search teams moved to the old pump road, while environmental crews prepared to dig through frozen ground near the service yard. Caleb returned home before the first excavator arrived. He found Graham waiting by the fence. No coffee this time, no bread,
no neighborly offering to soften the distance between them. Just Graham in his dark coat, snow gathering on his shoulders, looking toward the old rescue house, as if it were a door that had betrayed him. "You should have let the county handle this," Graham said. "I did. You brought the dog back into it." Caleb looked down. Rook stood at his side, rigid but quiet. His amber eyes stayed on Graham's right hand. Graham noticed.
He slowly raised that hand from his coat pocket. The ring finger bent wrong at the middle joint, the old scar pale against winter-reddened skin. "Your dog did that," Graham said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "He was a good dog then, too," Graham continued. "Too good. Wouldn't leave her. Wouldn't stop barking. Eli should have kept him away from people's business." Caleb stepped forward once, not enough to threaten, enough to answer. She was people's business. Graham's face changed then, not into rage, but into something older and more frightening. Belief. "You think I wanted her hurt?" he asked. "I wanted time. A week, maybe 2. Time to get the deal signed, time to fix what could be fixed quietly. Evelyn never understood that a town can die from the right information at the wrong moment." Caleb heard the old shape of his own shame in that sentence. The excuse of timing. The comfort of letting silence dress itself as responsibility. "I used to think silence bought time," Caleb said. "It doesn't. It only hands the bill to someone who wasn't in the room." Rook trembled. Caleb felt it through the leash. For one terrible second, he thought the dog might lunge. But Rook only planted his paws in the snow and held his ground. Not attacking, not retreating. Remembering, but no longer trapped inside the memory. Sirens flashed faintly beyond the trees near the pump road. Then came the low grind of machinery biting into frozen earth. Graham turned toward the sound. His shoulders dropped. "They found something," Caleb said. Graham did not answer. Snow fell between them, bright under the porch light, soft as ash. At last, Graham looked back at Rook. "I thought if no one dug," he said, voice almost gone, "the town could keep living." Caleb's reply came quietly. "You kept it quiet. That isn't the same thing." Across the road, more red and blue lights washed over the snow. Rook leaned once against Caleb's leg, tired but steady. This time, Caleb did not mistake stillness for peace. They found the first drum before sunrise. It came out of the frozen ground with a groan of metal and ice, lifted by chains beneath the blue wash of emergency lights. The steel was rusted through in places. Black soil clung to its sides. Dr. Simon Red stood with a clipboard pressed to his chest, his face pale above his scarf. "Seal the pit," he told the crew. "Nobody steps closer without protection." More drums followed. Not enough to turn Snowfall Harbor into a wasteland. Enough to prove Evelyn Klein had not been afraid of shadows. Enough to prove silence had weight. And that weight had been buried near the water for 6 years. By mid-morning, Graham Sutter stood outside the old rescue warehouse, while June read the warrant. He did not fight. He did not shout that he was innocent. He only watched the crews pull another drum from the earth and looked for the first time like a man seeing the size of the thing he had made. "I thought I was keeping the town alive," he said. June's voice was quiet. "You kept it quiet. That isn't the same thing." When they led him away, no crowd cheered. No one clapped for Caleb. People stood behind the tape with gloved hands over their mouths, ashamed to witness something they had once refused to question. The final answer about Evelyn came later,
in pieces, as all hard truths do. A search team found remains beyond the old pump road, where the storm runoff dipped toward the reeds. The medical examiner would need time, but June told Marla enough before the news reached anyone else. Evelyn had been hurt that night. She had tried to get away. The cold had finished what human cowardice began. Marla did not collapse. She sat at her kitchen table with both hands around the pale blue tin box and nodded once, as if some part of her had known where grief ended and had simply waited for a map. "She didn't leave," Marla said. "No," Caleb answered. Rook lay near the door, head on his paws. When Marla crossed the room and touched the old dog's torn ear, he did not pull away. "Thank you for coming back," she whispered. The Winter Light Festival was not cancelled, but it changed. There were fewer vendors, fewer tourists, fewer speeches. The streets still glowed gold beneath the snow, but the brightness felt humbler now. Lila Monroe left a paper bag of warm bread on Caleb's porch without knocking. Deputy Cole Brannigan stopped by to return a length of old canine rope from the warehouse and could not quite meet Caleb's eyes. "I should have asked more questions," Cole said. Caleb looked at the rope, stiff with age. A lot of people should have. That was all. No forgiveness was handed out like candy. No apology repaired 6 years. But something had shifted. The town no longer spoke Evelyn's name as if it were a draft under a door. Nora came by 2 days later to check Rook's hips and paws. She scolded Caleb for letting him stand too long in the cold, then quietly approved the new rugs, the raised food bowl, the shorter walking route Caleb had marked on a map. "He's not a witness anymore," she said, packing her kit. "Let him be a dog." Caleb looked at Rook sleeping near the stove, muzzle silver in the firelight. "I'm trying." Before repairing the floor, Caleb kept one narrow board from the north wall. He cleaned it, sanded the edges, and set it on a shelf beside his father's cracked watch and a copied photograph of Evelyn, Eli, and young Rook. The house did not feel empty now. It did not feel healed either. It felt honest. On the first clear morning after the dig, Caleb and Rook walked the harbor path. Lake Michigan shone hard and bright beyond the ice. Snow rested on rooftops, railings, ropes, and the quiet backs of boats waiting for spring. Rook walked slowly, his shoulder brushing Caleb's leg. He was not searching. For once, he was only walking. Caleb's phone rang near the lighthouse. June's name lit the screen. "Tessa recovered one more file," she said. It was a scanned envelope. Evelyn addressed it to another lake town. Caleb looked down at Rook. The old dog lifted his head, calm but listening. "What did it say?" Caleb asked. June was silent for half a breath. Snowfall Harbor was not the first. Caleb closed his eyes against the cold wind, then rested his hand on Rook's head. "We won't rush," he said, "but we won't look away." Sometimes the hardest thing in life is not finding the truth, but choosing not to look away once it finds us. Caleb and Rook remind us that silence may feel safe for a while, but only honesty can begin real healing. Maybe the miracle in this story was not the evidence under the floorboards, but the courage to listen when something quiet was asking to be heard. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a moment when doing the right thing cost you peace? Thank you for watching, and if you want more stories of loyalty, truth, and second chances, please subscribe. May God give you courage for the truth, peace after the storm, and grace for the road ahead.